The fuel gauge read empty. Sheriff Tom Garrett tapped the glass. The needle did not move. He climbed under the truck and opened the inspection port on the diesel tank. He shined his flashlight inside. The tank was bone dry, not a drop of fuel. But the last fuel receipt in the cab showed the driver had filled up 47 miles away. A diesel truck could not travel that far on an empty tank. Something was wrong. The Mack truck had been discovered in a grove of cottonwood trees off Highway 287 in Wyoming. A rancher clearing brush found it. The truck had been hidden for years. Branches covered the windshield. Tumbleweeds filled the wheel wells. The rancher called the county. They ran the plates. The truck belonged to a driver named Lucas Bennett. He had been reported missing in August 2019, 6 years ago. Garrett examined the cab. The interior was coated in dust. The seats were cracked. The steering wheel was faded, but the logbook was still on the dashboard. Garrett opened it. The last entry was August 14, 2019. Lucas had logged a fuel stop in Rawlins at 2:34 p.m. He bought 93 gallons. The receipt was stapled to the page. Garrett checked the odometer. The truck showed 318,000 miles. He subtracted the mileage from the logbook, 47 miles. That was the distance Lucas had traveled after fueling up. Garrett calculated the fuel consumption. A Mack truck averaged 6 miles per gallon. 47 miles would use about 8 gallons. That meant Lucas should have had 85 gallons left. But the tank was empty. Garrett wondered where the fuel had gone. He checked for leaks. The fuel lines were intact. No stains on the ground. No smell of diesel. The fuel had not leaked out. It had been removed or used. But how? Garrett called a diesel mechanic. The mechanic arrived and inspected the truck. He checked the fuel system, the tank, the pump, the injectors. Everything was functional. But when the mechanic opened the filler cap, he smelled something. Not diesel, water. The mechanic siphoned a sample from the tank. He tested it. The tank contained water, not diesel. Someone had drained the diesel and filled the tank with water. Garrett asked how much water. The mechanic said about 30 gallons. Not a full tank, just enough to weigh the truck down. Garrett wondered why someone would do that. The mechanic said water in a diesel tank would ruin the engine. The truck would not start, or it would start and then stall. Garrett tried the ignition. The engine turned over but did not catch. The mechanic said the fuel system was contaminated. It would take days to clean. Garrett told him to leave it. This was a crime scene. Garrett contacted the freight company Lucas had worked for. The company was still in business. The dispatcher remembered Lucas. She said he had been hauling agricultural equipment to Montana. His last check-in was August 14th at 3:12 p.m. He said he was making good time. He expected to arrive by midnight. The dispatcher confirmed. Lucas never arrived. The company filed a missing person report on August 16th. Search teams checked the route. They found nothing. The truck and cargo vanished. Garrett checked the trailer. It was detached, parked 50 feet from the truck. The doors were open. The interior was empty. The equipment was gone. Garrett checked the manifest. The cargo was tractors and plows, heavy items, worth over $200,000. The freight company had filed an insurance claim. They received $150,000. Garrett wondered who had taken the equipment. And when Garrett examined the area around the truck, the grove was remote. No homes nearby. No roads except the dirt path the rancher used. Garrett wondered how the truck had gotten here. The path was narrow, barely wide enough for a pickup. A semi would struggle. Garrett walked the path to the highway, about a quarter mile. He checked the ground. Old tire tracks, wide, like a semi. The tracks led from the highway to the grove, then stopped. The truck had been driven here, but by who? Garrett returned to the fuel receipt. Lucas had fueled up in Rawlins at 2:34 p.m. The next town on the route was Lander, about 80 miles north, but Lucas had only traveled 47 miles. That meant he had stopped somewhere between Rawlins and Lander. Garrett checked the map. There were no truck stops between the two towns. Only a few rest areas. And this grove. Garrett contacted other drivers who had been on Highway 287 in August 2019. He found 2 drivers who remembered the route. One driver said he had seen a Mack truck parked on the shoulder near mile marker 73. The driver said the truck's hazard lights were on, like it had broken down. The driver considered stopping, but another vehicle was already there. A white van. The driver assumed help had arrived. He kept going. Garrett asked what time. The driver said around 3:30 p.m. on August 14th. Garrett checked the location. Mile marker 73 was 47 miles north of Rawlins. The exact distance Lucas had traveled. Garrett concluded that Lucas had stopped there, maybe for a mechanical issue, or maybe someone flagged him down. The white van driver had approached. Then what? Garrett contacted the second driver. The second driver said she had passed mile marker 73 around 5 p.m. The Mack truck was gone, but the white van was still there, parked on the shoulder. The driver thought it was strange, but she did not stop. Garrett requested traffic camera footage from August 14, 2019. The State Patrol sent archived files. Garrett reviewed hours of footage. At 3:27 p.m., a Mack truck appeared at mile marker 73. The truck pulled onto the shoulder. The hazard lights activated. 3 minutes later, a white van pulled up behind the truck. A man got out of the van. He walked to the truck. The driver's door opened. Lucas climbed out. The 2 men talked. Then Lucas walked to the back of the truck. The camera angle did not show what happened next. At 4:52 p.m., the Mack truck drove away, but the white van stayed. At 5:34 p.m., the van left. Garrett froze the footage. He zoomed in on the license plate of the van. The plate was partially visible. He enhanced the image. The plate was registered to a rental company in Casper, Wyoming. Garrett contacted the company. They checked their records. On August 14, 2019, a white van had been rented. The customer's name was Martin Drake. He paid with a credit card. The van was returned on August 15th. No damage reported. Garrett ran Martin Drake through the system. Martin had a record: theft, fraud, assault. He had been arrested multiple times, released on probation. His last known address was in Casper. Garrett drove to the address. It was an apartment complex. The manager said Martin had moved out in 2020. No forwarding address. Garrett checked employment records. Martin had worked at a diesel repair shop in Casper from 2017 to 2019. He was fired in September 2019 for stealing tools. Garrett contacted the shop owner. The owner remembered Martin. He said Martin was skilled, but unreliable. He showed up late. He cut corners. The owner fired him after tools went missing. Garrett asked if Martin had any connection to trucking. The owner said yes. Martin often worked on semi-trucks. He knew diesel engines inside and out. Garrett asked if Martin knew how to drain a fuel tank. The owner said yes. It was basic mechanic work. Garrett issued a warrant for Martin's arrest. He sent Martin's information to law enforcement across the region. 3 weeks later, a trooper in Colorado pulled over a white van. The driver matched Martin's description. The trooper arrested him. Martin was extradited to Wyoming. Garrett questioned him. Martin denied everything. He said he had rented the van for personal use. He did not remember stopping on Highway 287. Garrett showed him the traffic footage. Martin went quiet. Garrett asked what Martin had done to Lucas. Martin said nothing. Garrett said Lucas was missing. His truck was found with water in the fuel tank. The cargo was gone. Martin said he did not know anything about that. Garrett pressed harder. He said the footage showed Martin talking to Lucas. Martin finally broke. He said he had been hired. By who? Martin said he did not know. A man contacted him through an encrypted app. The man offered Martin $5,000 to disable Lucas's truck and take the cargo. Martin agreed. Garrett asked how Martin disabled the truck. Martin said he told Lucas the truck had a fuel leak. Lucas believed him. Martin offered to fix it. Lucas let him. Martin drained the diesel. He filled the tank with water. He told Lucas the leak was fixed. Lucas paid him cash and drove away. Martin followed him. Lucas made it a few miles. Then the truck stalled. Martin pulled up. He offered to tow the truck. Lucas agreed. Martin towed the truck to the Grove. He unloaded the cargo into a separate trailer he had rented. Then he left Lucas there. Garrett asked where Lucas was now. Martin said he did not know. Lucas was alive when Martin left. Martin said Lucas was angry, but Martin thought Lucas would call for help. Martin drove away. He delivered the cargo to a warehouse in Denver. The man who hired him paid the $5,000. Martin never saw Lucas again. Garrett asked for the man's name. Martin said he never learned it. They only communicated online. The messages were deleted. Garrett did not believe Martin. He checked Martin's bank records. On August 15, 2019, Martin deposited $5,000 cash, but there was another deposit, $10,000. On August 18, Garrett asked Martin about it. Martin said it was payment for another job. Garrett asked what job. Martin said he did not remember. Garrett said he would charge Martin with kidnapping and theft. Martin's lawyer negotiated a plea deal. Martin agreed to tell the truth. Martin admitted he had lied. He said the man who hired him had given additional instructions. After Martin towed the truck to the Grove, the man called. He told Martin to make sure Lucas did not leave. Martin asked what that meant. The man said Lucas knew too much. He could not be allowed to report the theft. Martin said he did not want to hurt anyone. The man said he would pay $10,000. Martin agreed. Martin returned to the Grove. Lucas was trying to call for help, but there was no cell signal. Martin told Lucas he would drive to town and send a tow truck. Lucas believed him. Martin left, but he did not send help. He drove to Denver and delivered the cargo. 3 days later, the man paid him $10,000. Martin assumed Lucas eventually found help or died. Martin did not care. Garrett arrested Martin for kidnapping and accessory to murder. But Lucas's body had not been found. Garrett organized a search of the Grove. They used cadaver dogs. The dogs found nothing. Garrett expanded the search. They checked a 2-mile radius. Still nothing. Garrett wondered if Lucas had walked away. Maybe he survived. Or maybe his body was somewhere else. Garrett checked Lucas's phone records. Lucas's phone had been active until August 14th at 8:47 p.m. The last call he made was to his sister. The call lasted 12 seconds. Then the phone went offline. Garrett contacted Lucas's sister. Her name was Rachel. She said Lucas had called her. He sounded distressed. He said his truck broke down. He said he was stranded. He asked her to send help. Rachel asked where he was. Lucas said he did not know. The call cut out. Rachel tried calling back. No answer. She called the police. They said they would check the area, but they never found Lucas. Garrett listened to the call recording. Lucas's voice was strained, scared. In the background, Garrett heard wind. And something else. Water. Like a stream. Garrett checked the map. There was a creek near the Grove, about half a mile east. Garrett drove to the creek. He walked the bank. After 20 minutes, he found something. A shoe. Work boot. Size 11. Lucas's size. Garrett called the forensic team. They searched the area. They found more items. A wallet. A phone. Both belonged to Lucas, but no body. The forensic team expanded the search. They followed the creek downstream. 2 miles later, they found skeletal remains. The remains were partially buried in sediment. The medical examiner confirmed the identity. It was Lucas Bennett. The cause of death was drowning. The examiner said Lucas had likely fallen into the creek. The water level in August could be high from runoff. Lucas may have been disoriented, exhausted. He slipped. The current carried him downstream. He drowned. Garrett reviewed the timeline. Martin had left Lucas stranded. Lucas tried to call for help. His phone died. He walked toward the creek. Maybe he thought he could follow it to a road. But he fell in. He could not get out. He drowned. Garrett felt a wave of anger. Lucas had been abandoned, left to die, all for a cargo theft. Garrett contacted the man who hired Martin. The encrypted messages had been deleted, but the forensic team recovered fragments. The messages mentioned a warehouse in Denver. Garrett contacted Denver police. They raided the warehouse. It was empty, but they found records, sales receipts for agricultural equipment. The equipment matched Lucas's cargo. The receipts showed the equipment had been sold to a farm supply company in Nebraska. The company paid cash. No questions asked. Garrett contacted the farm supply company. The owner said he had bought the equipment from a man named Steve Larson. The owner described Steve, tall, graying hair, wore a leather jacket. The owner said Steve had offered the equipment at a discount. The owner did not ask where it came from. He just wanted a good deal. Garrett asked if the owner had contact information for Steve. The owner said no. Steve paid cash and left. Garrett ran the name Steve Larson. He found 3 matches in Wyoming and Colorado. He contacted each one. 2 had alibis. The 3rd was harder to reach. Garrett drove to his address in Cheyenne. The house was abandoned. Neighbors said Steve had moved out in 2020. No one knew where he went. Garrett checked property records. Steve owned a storage unit in Fort Collins. Garrett obtained a warrant. He searched the unit. Inside he found documents, manifests, bills of lading, all forged. The documents showed Steve had been running a cargo theft ring for years. He hired people like Martin to disable trucks. Then he sold the stolen goods. Garrett issued a warrant for Steve's arrest. The FBI added him to their most wanted list. 6 months later, Steve was arrested in Texas. He was using a fake name, working at a trucking company. Garrett flew to Texas. He interviewed Steve. Steve admitted running the theft ring. He said he targeted independent drivers. They were easier to isolate. Steve said he hired Martin to disable Lucas's truck. He told Martin to make sure Lucas did not report the theft. Steve said he did not explicitly order Martin to kill Lucas, but he knew Martin would do whatever it took. Steve said he paid Martin $15,000 total, $5,000 for the theft, $10,000 for the silence. Garrett asked if Steve had any remorse. Steve said no. He said trucking was a business. Lucas was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Steve said he had stolen over $2 million worth of cargo. Lucas was just one victim. Garrett felt disgusted. Steve was sentenced to 30 years for conspiracy to commit murder and organized theft. Martin was sentenced to 25 years. Lucas's sister Rachel attended the sentencing. She said she was glad they found answers, but she wished they had found Lucas sooner. She said Lucas loved driving. He was proud of his work. He did not deserve to die alone in a creek. Garrett agreed. He said he wished he could have saved Lucas, but at least now Lucas could rest, and his killers were behind bars. Garrett closed the case, but he kept thinking about the fuel tank, the water inside, the deliberate sabotage that left Lucas stranded. Garrett wondered how many other drivers had been targeted, how many trucks sat abandoned in remote places, waiting to be found. He requested a review of unsolved missing trucker cases. The list was long, over 300 in the last 10 years. Garrett could not investigate them all, but he made a promise. He would never ignore an abandoned truck again, because every truck told a story, and every story deserved to be heard. Some mysteries solve themselves when the smallest detail refuses to be ignored. An empty tank filled with water. A cry for help that went unanswered. A man left behind while the world kept moving.